and welcome to the Rental Realm, where transparency meets opportunity in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Nicole, traveling in an RV full-time, connecting with real estate agents and investors all across the U.S. to give you an inside look at what's really happening in our rental markets. From short-term to long-term rentals, we're uncovering the numbers behind these deals. And today, I have an awesome guest on. Katie and I are actually from a similar market over in Florida, but really excited to have you guys get to hear from her today and a little bit about the South Florida market. So Katie, thank you so much for joining me today. Super excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. This is only my second podcast I've ever been on. So
you're going to do awesome. Super excited to have you on. And to start off, would love to hear a little bit about how you actually got started in real estate.
So I actually started real estate, got my license in Florida about 8 years ago. I got inspired by watching Flip or Flop and Joanna Gaines. And I'm like, I can do that too. My dad was in real estate. He was a teacher, but he did real estate on the side. He was very frugal and dabbled in it here and there. He worked more in the summer when he was off and then started building his real estate empire. It was a small one, but he bought a lake house for $30,000 about 30 years ago. Okay. Crazy, right?
That's incredible.
So he started doing short-term rentals with it, a vacation rental, 30 years ago. And I just grew up around that. I watched my dad do that and then never was interested, never thought I'd be doing real estate. But then sadly he passed away and I took it over. And so that property today is worth $500,000. So he bought it for $30,000 30 years ago, and now it's worth $500,000. So my mom was going to sell it. And I'm like, please don't sell it. Let me take it over. And I did not have a mentor. I literally just watched my dad. Highly suggest getting a mentor though, because I made tons of mistakes. But I learned over the years, and good, bad, whatever. But I ended up being really good at that. Loved it, enjoyed managing my own property. We didn't have much money then, but I fixed it up, made it look better, and did a lot of work to it, what we could at the time. And every year we'll update it more and we'll put more into it as we go. But that's kind of how I got into it. And then I started doing more real estate. I got licensed in Tennessee. I'm from Tennessee. Yeah, that's how I got into short-term rentals and real estate. And then we actually started buying fixer-uppers. We've bought 5 houses in 8 years, fixed them up, flipped them, lived in them, and then would sell them 2 years later, a year later. And we just started keeping them. We just bought another house a year ago and it's a total gut job. It's a money pit. It's another story. And then we rented out long-term our last house. So we started doing that. Paid off my husband's over $200,000 student loan debt in 5 years because of real estate. So it really got us to where we are today with, real estate and learning as I went. So
that's incredible. And I mean, a lot of good points in there, but oh my gosh, that he got it for $30,000 and it's now worth $500,000. I mean, that just shows that time in the game is what matters most for most of us just trying to get started. It's hard in this market to feel like in 5 years that you can accomplish that and be at that good point where you paid off $200,000 of debt. That's incredible, because for most people, they just look at that and they're like, I give up. I'm never going to be able to get that with my normal salary, because most Americans are making, I think it's maybe $70,000 a year is the average. I'll have to actually look that up, but that's absolutely wonderful. And I would love to hear a little bit about Tennessee too, because I know that's where you actually have one of your short-term rentals. But tell us a little bit about both markets, actually, since you are from Tennessee originally. Where in Tennessee are you from? And then a little bit about where you are now in Florida.
So I'm from a small town called La Follette. It's about an hour north of Knoxville and an hour and a half from the Smokies, Gatlinburg area, which is super popular. It is super saturated. That market is. We do want to buy property there and actually use it. And, when we're in town, because our family lives there. But, they say oh, it's saturated, you shouldn't buy there. Well, if you do it right, it doesn't matter, right? But your property has to stand out. You may have to work a little bit harder and make it stand out and see what the competition is and what you're working with. So you need to do more research. But for example, my lake house, in this small rural town in Tennessee. A lot of people haven't even heard about it, but if you live in Ohio, everyone hears about Norris Lake, right? It's a small town, but everyone goes to Norris Lake for vacation. It's like one of the largest lakes, the cleanest lakes near Ohio, even Kentucky. I have a lot of people come from Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee around the state. But that's our market, is mainly Ohio, that we advertise to the market to, and they know the area and they come there every year. And, our season is during the summer, Memorial Day through Labor Day. We're booked solid 100% no matter what. It's a small lake house, but we stand out because most of the houses on that lake are mansions. So if it's just a couple that wants to go to the lake, there's our place, and it is updated. It's cute. It's boho-ish, because it's this little cabin in the woods, but it's on the lake. So it has to be on the lake to succeed there. It has to be updated, and you may be more successful having a smaller place rather than a bigger place.
We've seen that so much lately of everyone's trying to get the 4 or 5 bedroom properties, and there's so many of those now that you're almost competing more against other 4 and 5 bedroom properties in a lot of these markets than the 1 and 2 bedroom units. And I personally have never traveled with a big group. That's just never something I've done. And so when I'm traveling, it's usually me and one other person. And so I never have the chance to book the villas or the mansions that are in these popular cities. I am looking for the 1 or 2 bedroom places. And I think just over the past 3 years, even the coaching that I started originally when I got into Airbnbs, they're like, you want to look for the homes that can sleep the most amount of people, which I think everyone was getting that same advice from all these short-term rental coaches. And now it's hard to make the cash flow on a lot of those places, especially in slow times, because you're often just getting the people that are looking for weekend getaways or the couple that took a week off during the slower time of the year. You're not getting the 11, 12 people groups that are coming to these popular destinations during your slow season. And I think you actually close yours down in slow season, correct? Or do you guys keep yours open?
Yeah, we actually close it down in the winter just because we have issues with the pipes freezing. If someone's not there for 3 weeks and the water's not running and it's 30 degrees, 20 degrees outside, it can be a mess. And the roads out there, it takes a while for them to plow the roads if there's snow and there's ice. And then you're out in this small, rural town with no way to get out. So it's I'd rather just shut it down, not deal with that. Some people keep theirs open, but if they have a newer house that really doesn't have those issues, ours is an older, smaller property that we can get by with not renting it for a couple months. We just calculate that in, because we have no issue renting it from, basically we open it in March and then we end in November before it gets super snowy and icy.
And that makes a lot of sense. We've purposely stayed away from markets. I'm originally from Maryland, so used to dealing with snow, but have always thought about that of the short-term rentals. I'm like, if you get someone stuck in the snow, you're going to be paying a lot of money trying to help get them out or find someone that can even come out to have the roadways. And I've seen reviews from people that were like, the person didn't let us know that we needed chains on our tires, and so we couldn't even make it to the property, and then dealing with cancellation. So I personally feel like that would be the way I would go to. How does that affect your cash flow at the end of the year? Are you guys still making a decent amount with only being open pretty much mostly summer?
Yeah, it makes sense for us. And we calculate that in with, what we charge during the summer, and it works for us. For example, Gatlinburg, a lot of people travel during the winter in Gatlinburg because you're in the mountains, you want to see the snow, and they're more prepared because it's a bigger tourist area, right? So I don't own one there right now, although we would like to, like I said, but I think they are more prepared with clearing off the roads and making sure people, pipes aren't freezing. They're more prepared than where our place is.
My parents were actually just in Gatlinburg for the first time last week. They went with a few of my aunts and uncles, and they couldn't believe how packed it was there. It was their first time going, and they were like, it was like New York City traffic on the weekends was how they described it for how packed of an area that is. And you're so close to that and get to benefit from all of that. If you were to buy another place there, I'm sure on the lake would be probably just as expensive as being in Gatlinburg, possibly. But a lot of the people now, I have been seeing a lot of short-term rentals up for sale in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, just because, as you were saying, you need to stand out in those markets. And I'm not super familiar with that market, but what would you say for someone that was looking to invest there? What should someone really be looking for to try to stand out amongst all the competition there?
Now, the ones with the pools and the view and hot tubs are a must there. So there's a lot of new builds going up right now, new Airbnbs being listed that have beautiful infinity pools and hot tubs looking over the mountains. So something like that, and that has amenities, you have to kind of be more elaborate nowadays with what you do with the interior. You need to have a target audience rather than trying to target every single person and attract anybody and everybody. So I feel like the ones that niche down, such as like the Bachelorette Airbnbs, some people may think, well, I'm just marketing and targeting girls that are on a bachelorette trip. I mean, and I'm eliminating all this huge audience, but in reality, it's actually better to do it that way because, you do have that specific target audience. And typically those are the ones that book out and book the most, and you make the most revenue out of them.
For sure. And you see those booked up like sometimes a year in advance, I feel like, for some of those bachelorette ones in Scottsdale and other areas that are really popular for bachelorette parties. And I even saw one on Facebook the other day. It was nowhere I've heard of in, I think, Missouri. So kind of random spot. So they were charging $3,000 a night because they had a go-kart racing track around the entire property. And that's the level that we're getting to now with Airbnbs, where I'm like, all right, having the pool and hot tub is like step one, and then adding in all these extra amenities if you want to be charging close to $1,000 a night. None of my properties are quite up there. I think the most we've got was a $780 a night booking, which was incredible for F1 in Austin just last month, but it's getting intense with what you actually have to do to stand out. And I've seen some of those new builds in Tennessee where just gorgeous properties, and the view is really, I feel like, what's standing most people out. And that's even one of the properties we work with. It just has this awesome view of the Oregon Mountains in New Mexico. And that one is now like a top 5%. We have a 4.99 with 80 reviews because people book it for the view. None of the other houses in that market have a view, and ours does. So that makes a huge difference for your cash flow at the end of the day. But I know you're from Tennessee, so let's hear a little bit about Florida now, because that's where you've been living. So what part of Florida are you in, and what is the market looking like there right now?
So I live on the Treasure Coast of Florida, just north of West Palm Beach in Palm City. And I have managed several Airbnbs in Port St. Lucie, Stewart, that's right near, the ocean. Hutchinson Island is right there. And then there are certain areas in West Palm Beach that do well, Jupiter that does well. But in Florida, I have found that the restrictions, you have to be careful with the restrictions, where you cannot Airbnb. Some cities allow it, some don't. You have a state short-term rental tax, like a tourist tax, that you have to pay. And then each county has their own tax. So it could be 5%. Martin County is 5%. West Palm Beach is 6%. And then you have to tack on the state. State of Florida is 6%. Tennessee, I believe it's 7%. But, Airbnb and VRBO are two platforms that I use mainly. There's others out there. And then I book direct too. So depending on what platform it is, they'll take out, the taxes and they'll pay it directly to the state. Some, you have to make sure that you're paying that monthly. So a lot of people don't understand when they get into Airbnb that they're going to have to be calculating these taxes because it's different in every county. My Airbnb in Tennessee, it's so much easier than Florida because it's just sent straight to the state. I don't have any taxes in the county. So to me, it's cheaper and easier to deal with. Florida is a little bit harder and you have to register your property with the state. So if you don't register it, some people try to get away with it and then, you get fines and they shut you down and make you register the property, and then that's more money. Make sure that you calculate those costs in when you do purchase it and you understand, and you have a mentor and you have an agent that understands that, because I've worked with several clients after the fact that they worked with another agent that did not understand Airbnb, claim they do, but then they really don't, and then they lead them in the wrong direction. So, ultimately that's not our responsibility for you to do your own homework, right? We don't know if you don't know per se, but, it's important to work with an agent that understands that can give you a heads up and help you with that.
That's extremely important. And I think a lot of agents want to get into working with investors, and we all have to start somewhere. That's the hardest part, is you have to start somewhere. But at the same time, if you're not familiar, that's where making sure that the agent has experience with owning their own or managing other people's Airbnbs, because there are so many different things that go into it. And that is a huge thing I think new investors miss. And we're in 7 different markets and even 3 across Florida. And some places do collect the taxes out of Airbnb and Vrbo directly, but there's a lot of markets that still aren't doing that, which makes no sense to me, that why they wouldn't easily do that. But people don't even know what the tax rates are when they're getting started in it. They don't consider a lot of the startup cost of how much it's actually going to cost to launch your Airbnb and all the furnishings that go into it, which is easily $20,000+ for a lot of properties that people are getting now. What are some other costs that you've seen investors not pay attention to or not think of when they're going to be launching an Airbnb? I know for a lot of the people I've personally talked to, they have no clue what insurance rates are now in Florida, which it's been a little bit worse, I feel like, on the West Coast, but you're even more familiar with your market in the East Coast. So what are you seeing for insurance rates over there?
Insurance is crazy and something needs to be done about it. I feel like we're trying, we're going to the state and, our governing officials, and they know it's a problem and apparently they're working on it, but hopefully something will be done about it soon. But yes, that is crazy. I always get quotes for my clients. It's just so they have an idea before we get under contract on a property. So that's super important. Not all agents work like that, and they get under a contract and then they pay for the inspection and they pay for, all this stuff. And then you get down to it and then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't afford this insurance, but it's good to get several quotes. There's different policies out there. You have to make sure that you're getting a short-term rental policy and that you are protected, because sometimes things can happen and then you aren't protected because of how you're renting your property and they aren't aware that it is a short-term rental, So that has been something that buyers are not aware of in Florida, because Tennessee's way cheaper, but Florida, you have to calculate for that.
And each market has its own thing. In San Antonio, Texas, property taxes are super high there. And that's something a lot of people aren't aware of when they're entering that market. And I think people have a general knowledge of the hurricanes and that insurance is going to be more expensive, but I don't think they understand how insane it might be compared to where they're currently at. Even one of the houses, and you're familiar with Palm Harbor.
I used to live there too.
Yeah. And we were talking about that. You're like, yeah, Palm Harbor is this is such a small world. So one of the houses over there, though, I got proper insurance to give a quote on it. And the owners are currently paying $4,000 a month. They had this awesome deal, and I'm sure it's going to go up this year. But when I got the quote, it was $16,000 for insurance for the year. So 4 times what they're currently paying. And it's for a new buyer to come in, that ate away. I had some people looking at the property and that ate away at so much of the cash flow, where we're like, all right, it doesn't quite make sense at this point anymore for the prices which we still have pretty high interest rates. Housing prices haven't really dropped too much, and we're looking at super high insurance. So I think Florida has been a more difficult market for people to enter into for the short-term rentals, though they're just not aware of what they're going to be entering into. So when you're walking a new buyer that's looking to start becoming a real estate investor, what are the steps that you walk through as an agent with them, as you were already mentioning, of helping pull insurance quotes so that they're aware of that before they even get under contract? What are some other things that for a new investor they should be trying to do before actually getting under contract?
Taxes are a big thing, also that like people don't realize that their taxes are going to go up, right? Like once they purchase it at a higher price point, it's based on the purchase price. So, that following year, and we have a homestead exemption in Florida, but you don't have that in Tennessee. So some people aren't aware of that either. And you can only homestead your primary property. So that's a discount on the taxes. So if a property that you're purchasing is a primary residence, those taxes will definitely go up because you cannot homestead that, right? So I actually have a spreadsheet of like all the expenses that I actually use for myself, and then I give that to my clients. I have a spreadsheet of all, if you want to be detailed about it, you can do average, like a percentage, like some people, calculate it like that. Or I have a whole spreadsheet of like cleaning expenses, although you do charge that to your guest, but you have to put like all the little details in, like how much are you going to budget for furniture? Like, what are your monthly expenses? Make sure you put, Wi-Fi, electric, water. Is there an HOA? Is there not an HOA? You got to calculate that in. And so I do have like a whole spreadsheet that I do give to my buyers and let them fill that out and like do their own homework, because, ultimately as agents, there's only so much we can do, and every buyer is different, right? So they have a different goal in mind that they have to make those decisions themselves. I can point them in the right direction and give them all the tools and tell them what to expect. And then ultimately that is their decision, whether they want to break even and they want to use it as a vacation property, or they're okay with, not making a profit. They mainly want it as a vacation place for themselves. If they're snowbirds and they're going to be living in the winter, I do give them those expectations that in the summer, it may not rent that much, and they have to budget for that and they have to be okay with that because they're going to be using it during peak season. A lot of people don't know that either, and I have to explain that, what our season is and then what to expect during off season, and does that work for them? Does it not work for them?
Oh my gosh, that's a great point, because a lot of people, I think, put it into AirDNA as a new investor and see that gross number and they're like, cool, I'm going to divide that by 12 and that's going to be how much I'm earning monthly, which is nowhere close in Florida to what our seasonality is going to bring in. And a lot of people, like you said, with the cleaning fees, though we are passing those on to the guest, I think a lot of people, when they're putting it into AirDNA, they don't realize that the cleaning fees are usually included in that gross number. And so for these houses where you're charging $250, $300 per cleaning, that's going to also be included in AirDNA's numbers for what you're earning on a monthly basis, which you're usually, I don't know how you said it, but we usually try to earn $25 to $50 on those bigger houses. We try to collect $50 on each cleaning. So if it's a $250 cleaning, we'll charge it at $300, but you're not earning that extra. If you have 4 cleanings a month and it's $250, like that extra $1,000 that you think you're getting in your pocket is going straight to your cleaner's pocket, not to your pocket. And in a lot of markets, you have to also pay taxes on that cleaning amount too. In Texas, that's how they do it, where your gross amount is what's getting taxed. So you're getting over here, it's like an 11% tax for short-term rentals, which you have to pay on the cleaning fees too. And that's a lot of times $1,000 bill that some of our owners are seeing just for their cleaning. So little items like that really have to be accounted for. And that's something that most regular agents aren't going to know. If you've never had the experience with that, they have no clue that that's going to be how it's worked out. So making sure to work with someone that has the experience is going to be able to push you in the right direction. And I love that you said we can help show them in the right direction and give them all the tools. But at the end of the day, investors have to make those decisions themselves, which I see a lot of new investors want us to handhold the whole entire way and tell them, this is the property you're going to do best with. This is how much it's going to earn. And we can't do that. Legally, as agents, we're not able to do that. And we also can't guarantee. We can give you our expertise and knowledge, but at the end of the day, we're not able to guarantee what a property is going to bring in, because there's so many different factors that goes into it, from how you're going to furnish the property, how the management's going to be. If you're self-managing and you've never done this before, it might be good to have some guidance from a co-host or a property manager that's going to be able to help earn you the most cash flow at the end of the year.
We have no idea who's going to manage it, how they're going to manage it, or, are they going to have a good cleaning lady? Like, is she going to clean it good? If she doesn't, you get bad reviews, and then that may hurt people booking. And then, it's all about management. Your cleaning crew is super key to your business. Be good to those people. And then, you have no idea how they're actually going to furnish it, what amenities they're going to have, and if they're actually going to set it up the right way. So you can tell them, here's the potential if you do it right. And I've helped clients from purchasing the property to managing it. I, have managed several Airbnbs for other investors, and I've managed my own property. And some of the investors that I have managed for, unfortunately, did not understand what actually it entailed. You can't just buy a property, put a hard mattress down, put one picture on the wall, and you're going to make $10,000 a month. That's not going to happen. You got to set those expectations with them, and it's not for everybody because it is more work than long-term rentals. It is more rewarding, and it does pay more usually if you do it right with Airbnb. And if you set it up right too, a lot of people don't realize this either, but it can almost be on autopilot if you have the right software, you have the right tools in place. If you prepare your property every year, that's another thing that I do. I go to my property, I stay there, and I see what's broken, what needs fixed, because a lot of times the cleaners, when they do inspections, when they're in there, they don't see every little thing. Make sure they turn the TV on, but sometimes they forget, and then it's broken. But I stay there, I see what needs to be done, and then I, buy new fresh linens every year. I buy new towels every year. And other owners that I've managed for don't do any of that, Good thing they have me because I point that out, but then they also don't really understand, that they want to save money. They don't think they need it, and it's kind of like a battle with certain investors, that just want to get by bare minimum, but you really cannot do that with Airbnb. You got to, spend money to make money.
Definitely in this time, it just makes me laugh because I still see so many people doing that. And we had one person that was they really thought that they were going to make $10,000 a month because they've heard that on social media. And the house was one where 40,000, 5,000 year round on a good year was really realistically what they were going to be earning. And people just have this crazy expectation from what they've seen on social media that you can earn $10,000 a month on your Airbnb. And that it is possible for sure, but you have to be treating it like it is a 5-star hotel, not your grandma's house that you're going to go visit for free on the weekend. And most of these investors that I feel like it's a good mix now of people are starting to understand what really needs to go into it when you see houses with pickleball courts. And we've talked about the ones in Joshua Tree where it's just these absolute retreats of a place. And that's the new market for short-term rentals. And I've definitely worked with my investors too, where the cheapest one we helped set up was $6,000 for a 3-bedroom place, which it did okay for what it was, but he was breaking even at the end of every month. And that was the best possibility for putting in the bare minimum of what is now needed for a short-term rental.
Right. I stayed in Joshua Tree last year, and we stayed at a place with a pickleball court, a pool, a putting green. They had outdoor tubs where you can just, look at the stars, and super cool, right? And it had a hot tub, it had a sauna out there. It was like this whole resort in the backyard, and the inside was fine. It was cute. But we literally booked this place because it had a pickleball court, So because me and my husband just got into pickleball, and I'm obsessed with it. We did use those outdoor tubs where, at night with the lights hanging outside, and it was so cute. And so, people literally will book a place just for one amenity or all the amenities, right? I would have never booked that if it didn't have any of that. So I would rather pay more money for a place like that. And it's actually for sale. I looked it up. It was they bought that place for $300,000 and they have it on the market for 1.5. So I'm oh my gosh, I don't know if it's sold yet. And I don't know if someone will pay that, if it'll even make sense. But, they did dump a ton of money into that.
That is a huge difference, though. Oh my gosh. Good for them. I hope that they can get that.
Yeah. I mean, you never know, especially in this market. It may sit a while, but you see Joshua Tree, they're like, it's so elaborate, like all of them. Like they have all the amenities. They're so cute. And then here in Florida, I'm like, why don't we bring that here? I mean, you're starting to see more of it across the nation. Here and there, you'll find some, but like, why don't more people do that? Like here.
I really haven't seen that many when you think about it compared to some of these other markets. There's one house over in Tampa that I saw fairly recently where same thing. And that's what's interesting about Airbnbs is you really have to know your target audience. Like you didn't care as much what the inside looked like, but you were looking for those fun amenities outside. And this house over in Tampa had a blow up inflatable bounce house. They had an inflatable slide into the pool with running water. They had a huge outdoor TV screen, the diving board, grill, just like this paradise for kids and for adults where I was like, I'd want to use that too. And the inside wasn't anything special. It was kind of a house where if they would have shown the inside photos, you would have just scrolled past it on Airbnb, but their outside they did to the tens. And this place is booked out so far in advance compared to anywhere else in that market. And it wasn't in an amazing location either. It was a fine neighborhood, but nothing special about it. Just your normal neighborhood, had a nice driveway for a lot of parking so they could sleep a lot of people. But that's what really matters is knowing your audience and finding what's going to be most important. If you need to go crazy with the interior, if you need to have that amazing location on the lake with the view, if you want to have that backyard paradise, which I think we do need more of that in Florida. We don't have a ton of people that are doing that at this point. And we've talked about this a little bit, but what are your investors actually seeing for returns on either long, short, or midterm rentals? I know you've kind of mentioned that a lot of people are just hoping to break even at this point. So are you still seeing people that are getting good cash flow, or most of them now at this point with the goal of, I'm going to use this as a vacation property and hopefully break even?
I feel like in our market right now, it's a lot of snowbirds wanting to purchase a place for themselves, use it in the winter, rent in the summer. So we're seeing a lot of that right now. A lot of people are starting to sell their places because they're not making a profit and it's not for them. They didn't get into it as really a hobby. It was more, they wanted to make money. We're starting to see more Airbnbs put on the market because they're not making any profit. They may be breaking even. But, these same people could just pivot, right? For example, one of my owners that I managed for, it was slowing down, right? And I'm like, why don't you do midterm? You can rent in the winter during season and just rent 3, 4, 5 months at a time, which we started doing that and that worked. And it was actually easier for him because the more people that you have in and out of your place, stuff breaks more. So, we were constantly like having to replace stuff and all that. And so we were communicating more and he was more of like, wanted this to be more passive. So that started working for him. And now it's going to be a long-term rental. So if you just pivot rather than just sell it, if it makes sense number-wise, I recommend that. But yeah, you're seeing like the current maybe like 10 to 20% gross yield is what I'm seeing. If you look up on AirDNA, like that's kind of what you're seeing. The more established properties, the properties that have the most amenities and actually do it right, there's still money to be made there. So it's kind of repetitive, but it depends on what you do and to your place.
And that's what I want all of this to be about, is the transparency in it, because a lot of people are still coming down and doing, I don't want to say the bare minimum, but they're doing just kind of an average house and expecting to be earning what those top properties are. Most of the time when I'm walking through it with investors, I'm like, all right, here's the potential of what this house is earning, but they want to put $15,000 into the property, which that other house may have put $30,000 to $50,000 into their property, and you can't be expecting to earn $130,000 a year on this property if you're going to be putting in half of what they're offering. So I see a lot of that still, and just want people to be aware that it is possible. We're still seeing that, but you also have to think if those properties, there's a lot of them with 80, 100, 200 reviews now with a 4.9 rating. You have to come in and beat them, which either you're going to have to offer more or you're going to be trying to price less and be under them. And if that's your goal, is to earn as much as they are, you have to be really matching the quality that they're bringing in, which is tough to do in some of these really nice places down here because they bought at a time when rates were lower. So it was easier for them to get started, and they got started when there was the boom right after COVID. That was a great time to be in, and everyone's starting to travel, especially in Florida. Oh my gosh, everyone was just coming to Florida and moving to Florida too. But that's another great way to be looking at it, of always being able to pivot from short-term rentals to midterm rentals. And if it works, I think it is really hard now for most people to make a long-term rental work, unfortunately, in our market. But midterm rentals can be a great option. They are so much easier most of the time. I think I've only had one midterm guest where they were a hassle, and they weren't even truly that bad. They were not nearly as bad as our worst short-term rental guest, but it is so much less wear and tear. People are usually taking better condition of it. I will say sometimes the workers we have come into towns, though, leave a lot of stained towels. That's just one thing we've seen with midterm tenants, but it is much easier of not having all these little items breaking down and bed frames that are getting loose and just all sorts of little things that you get when you have these big groups of short-term rental guests coming in.
Right. I agree. Yep. It all depends on what the client wants, what your goal is, what the numbers look like, what county, what state you're in. And that's what's important about teaming up with an agent or a mentor. Mentors are super important. I never had one, like I said, and I wish I did. So I learned the hard way. But I've started mentoring others throughout this process, whether they use me as an agent or not. So that's something I have. I have like a starter's guide that, I hand to my clients or anybody that asks for that. I'm happy to help. I've had 8 years experience in that, and it is important. It's a lot of information, and I've done a ton of research, and I know you have too, and just learning from experience. I mean, you want to learn from the people that have done it. Not just, I randomly one day, I'm going to do this, and then not do your research.
I guess I started off with a mentor of sorts. Mine was very good at sales. And so that was a person where they set really unrealistic expectations. So when I got into it, I was the person that I was like, I'm going to make $8,000 a month passively with an Airbnb. And so we learned the hard way through a mentor that if I would have just done more research on them, I would have seen through it. But I was at a point where I was like, I'm ready. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to have a little bit of help and I'll figure it out with the information that I don't know, which if I would have had someone that has been through it and been more honest with it, because it's hard to find the people that will tell you the hard truth. This was a person where it was no matter where you set up, you're going to do it for less than $10,000 for setting up these properties. You're going to be cash flow in year one, and you're going to make $2,000 profit a month per property. And so I set up 5 and lost a bunch of money the first year that we did it, but learned so many lessons throughout the way where now I can help people avoid those same mistakes of not realizing that location is like number one in all markets. We were in neighborhoods that weren't great. And so it would be a constant thing of someone coming in and saying, I don't feel safe in this neighborhood, and having to give refund after refund out. So that was like our first learning lesson, where that's a huge mistake. If you make that and you're buying a house, thankfully we were doing rental arbitrage and we closed them down after a year. But if you buy a property and it's not in a great location, and you have to sell it shortly after you purchase it because it didn't make a great short-term rental and maybe won't make a great long-term rental either, that's a really hard lesson to learn. So Katie is here to help you avoid those mistakes and make sure that you don't do that. And in Florida, what are some of your favorite neighborhoods for someone that might be looking in Florida? What are some of the great little pockets that you would suggest if they were looking for a short-term rental?
So if you're looking in West Palm, Flamingo Park is super popular. It's expensive. So those people, a lot of them, bought a while back. Or there's neighborhoods right below that are actually cheaper, like kind of near the zoo, where a lot of those houses, me and you teamed up and we're showing a couple clients down there, but they have like the main house and then they have a guest house and you can live in one, rent out the other. I have several clients that have been successful with that. So those don't have HOAs. So the properties that don't have HOAs tend to be easier to manage, and you don't have all the rules. You don't have to go, answer to an HOA. You don't have the HOA fees. Those areas are close to downtown West Palm, so those do well. And then Jupiter, there's only like one condo complex that you can do nightly rentals. There's another one you can do monthly, but most of the condos there don't allow Airbnb. So be careful with that. And then there's a couple neighborhoods in there that don't have HOAs, or, a mile or two from the beach is important. You need to be close to the beach. It needs to have a pool. So those tend to do well. And then up in Martin County, you want to be Stewart area does well. Palm City is kind of further inland where I live. There's a few Airbnbs around here in areas that don't have HOAs. Some of the houses have like a guest house that do well, and they rent those out, $100 a month. So not bad. And on Hutchinson Island is a popular area to be, but you have to be careful with the restrictions. There's only certain condos. I have a list of them actually that you can Airbnb. The rest of them have either 1 month or 3 month or 6 month minimum, even a year. You can only do annual rentals there, so be careful where you're buying on Hutchinson Island. But there is a place called Nettles Island within Hutchinson Island. It's like this little man-made island there, and it's a cute little community. They're actually mostly mobile homes. There's a couple site-built homes, but you can only do cash, and you have to find a private lender and do your creative financing, and it is hard to get insurance on those. I've done the research. I've thought about buying one of those because of the environment. It's very beachy, and you're right there on the water. A lot of them are on the water. Some are not on the water, but it's on a small lot. But surprisingly, those do really well. People love Nettles Island. So I would look into that. I have managed in Port St. Lucie. Those did not do great. The ones with the pools did better than the ones without a pool. But those surprisingly attracted more parties, so we had more damage.
Very interesting. That's not an area I would expect that to happen, but
yeah, and I'm sensing that these parties that we had were locals because it had a pool and it was a big house. It fit a lot of people. I think it was 5 bedrooms, but it slept 10, 12 people. And with those, we also had a lot of construction workers that ruined a bunch of towels, and they were only there. They come in for the week to do a project, and then for some reason they love Port St. Lucie and staying in our Airbnbs. So it wasn't the ideal market per se. I'm sure other people may have better experiences, but that was my personal experience with it. So yeah, you got to be careful and know who you're marketing to and what areas, because in Florida, you want to be closer to the beach or on the beach. It has to have a pool. It's hot. So, you're going to make more money and be more successful and attract the ideal guests based on where you buy.
Absolutely. I pretty much, for anyone looking in Florida, I just say you have to have a pool if short-term rental is going to be your main source of income. If you're going to do midterm, other time of the year, or you're planning to do long-term at any point in time, maybe you can get away without having a pool. But for short-term rentals, you're going to be destroyed over summertime with people not wanting to come. The only ones I've seen do pretty well is if they were a multifamily place in a smaller unit where it was just someone coming into town looking to be close to the beach for the week. But if you're going to have a large property and be hosting these big groups, they want a place where they can have an experience there too and keep the kids entertained while at home, while the parents need some downtime to relax. But I absolutely love Flamingo Park. That is one of my favorite areas in West Palm Beach as well. It's just the cutest neighborhood, and you're so close to everything, but also in a really safe, it's expensive. So you have to be prepared for that, but it's such a safe area too. And I love food halls and like having the food hall right there too. I don't know if you've been to that one, but there's just a lot of cute attractions right around. And Port St. Lucie, I feel like in 5 years could be another hot market, but I don't think we're there yet by any means for a short-term rental. It's not attractive enough yet. Most people haven't heard it. I never heard of it before I came down to Florida. That was nothing on my radar, which it's building up a ton. It could be a good place where if you're able to hold it as a long-term rental, which again, you're not necessarily going to be cash flowing with a long-term rental in that area because it is just getting more expensive. And I feel like Fort Pierce will be next, of that being the next town that's really going to get developed. I think there's going to be a Buc-ee's coming to Fort Pierce soon. I love Buc-ee's. We're in Texas and I love getting to go there. It's our gas station we always stop at. So I feel like those two markets could be great of making it a long-term or mid-term rental right now, because a lot of families I feel like are moving up that way. And then eventually, once it's popular enough, maybe making it a short-term rental. But I've had people try to reach out being like, here's a good short-term rental in Port St. Lucie. I'm like, I don't think anyone's really going there for vacation that much. That's looking for like a 12-bedroom house, or if they are, they're probably looking for a cheaper alternative to be closer to Jupiter or be able to make a drive down to West Palm Beach or something like that. So I totally agree on those markets. And it's something you really have to pay attention to, like you were saying, of the restrictions, because in Jupiter, it's super, we had someone that was looking there and it's really hard to find something if someone was looking under, I think originally the budget was 400,000, which is really hard to find something there that's not an HOA, because I purposely avoid HOAs at all costs. I don't want to be yelled at because of my trash cans. That's just something I don't want to deal with for a short-term rental, but it's just hard to find those areas. And if you're working with the agent, making sure that they are familiar with that, so you're not getting under contract on a house where you have to do a 30-day stay, because then you're in a whole different ballgame. And if you were expecting to bring in short-term rental prices while doing midterm rentals, that's not usually how it's going to work out. So just always working with an agent that knows their stuff. But to wrap this up, would just love to hear what you expect to see over the next few years in Florida. And then what's one piece of advice that you'd give to a new investor looking in this area?
It's so hard to say what's actually going to happen over the next couple years. It is an election year, which things tend to drop off. I've had a lot of sellers just wait to relist their house until after the election to see what happens. And we've had, people selling their Airbnbs because they're worried about what's going to happen with the economy. Is the market going to crash? What's going to happen with the interest rates? Like, truly, if you have an agent that tells you, I know for sure that the market's going to be great next year, run. Because they don't know. No one knows, okay? We want to sound like experts, but truly, I don't want to lead someone in the wrong direction and be wrong. My opinion, I have no idea.
I like the honesty, because that's really, none of us do know.
I do hope that interest rates drop. They used to be, higher than 7%, right? They used to be 19%, before our time or whatever. And so, those people that remember the 19%, the 18% interest rates, they're like, oh, 7%'s nothing, But then us, we're like, oh, are we ever going to see a 3% interest rate again, or a 2% interest rate, our other house is 3%. I'm never selling that house, because I'm like, am I ever going to get that interest rate back? And the interest rate now on, the house that I just bought last year, it's 6%. So, but it made sense for us because we bought a fixer-upper. That's one thing right now in this market. If you're going to start an Airbnb in this market at these interest rates, buy a fixer-upper, because you're going to get a discount and you're going to have more money to play with, right? And then to counter that interest rate that you're going to have right now. We did that. I know we're going to make a profit if we turn around and sell this and do another flip, or if we keep it and rent it out. I know that we would make money either way. So think smart and do stuff like that, something that makes sense, because none of us have a crystal ball and none of us know what's going to happen. We can hope, And then one piece of advice I would give to people starting out is to, I've said this, get a mentor, do your research, don't just hop in, and team up with somebody. With a mentor, if you don't have the money to, pay for a mentor or, buy a course or whatever, you can do stuff for free with a mentor. and just say like you just want to follow along with them, like go help them for free so you can learn with a project that they're doing. And that's the best way to learn right now, instead of thinking that you can just do it yourself, which you probably can. Like I feel like I did it myself, but like I did a ton of research and I watched my dad growing up, and not everyone has that. But that's my story and that's how I got into it. But if you don't have someone that's knowledgeable in the family or a friend that understands, like find somebody, like network with people. Networking is huge. Get into the real estate groups, Airbnb groups on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. There's so much free advice too out there that, just make sure you do your research and learn. Always learn. I'm still learning 8 years later. So
it is constantly the people that think they have it all figured out and say that this is the way to do it might work for right now, but in another few months, the market is always changing. We're always going to be able to learn and grow. And I think partnering up with people, that's something I always do because we can learn so much from one another in this space and look at those people that are doing what you want to do and offer to be of assistance if you're not at that point where you can do it yourself. I'm sure you and myself, a lot of us are willing to, if you're able to help us out in any way, we're happy to teach as well. So Katie, thank you so much. It was awesome getting to chat with you today. And if someone wanted to reach out about having you help them as an agent, where is best to contact you?
So I am big on Instagram, I guess you would say. I'm no influencer, but I am on there all the time. So you can find me at katierose.re. So that's my Instagram handle. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, and my phone number, I don't mind giving that out, 423-494-0547. And then my email is katierosere@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Katie. It was great chatting with you today and hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thank you so much for having me.